15, and roll call. All members are present except Councillor Fonseca, but she is in the back, I know. Councillor McFadden's ill.
Miles is here.
And Councillor Sprovieri is on vacation. And
He's back.
all the rest are present. Are there any declarations of conflict of interest? Councillor Miles.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to declare a conflict of interest on the compensation portion of the budget as a non-union compensation, as I have a daughter that works for the region.
Okay, so noted. Councillor Moore.
What did you say?
Just say ditto.
I'd like to declare a conflict of interest on the compensation part of the budget as it relates to non-union salaried staff compensation, as I have daughters working for the region. Thank you.
All right, Councillor Sato.
I'd like to declare a conflict of interest on the non-union any salary discussions in the budget. For the same reason I have family members work for the region.
So noted. There's no approval of the minutes, seeing that this is the first meeting. Approval of the agenda, that the agenda for February the 12th, 2015 Regional Council budget meeting be approved. Moved by Councillor Gibson, seconded by Councillor Tovey. All in favor? Opposed, if any? Carried. That takes us right into the overview with a presentation by David Swark and Stephen Van Offwegen.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm actually not going to make a presentation. I'm just going to have very few opening comments. Over the next few meetings, we will present the region's proposed budget for 2015. You'll hear from Steve today. He'll give you an overview of the entire budget, and then also from the Peel Regional Police and the OPP. And then in subsequent meetings, you'll hear from the conservation authorities and then from each of the regional departments. We recognize that Council has not yet had the time to establish priorities for the coming term, so this budget is very much about carrying on with our current service levels and meeting the financial targets set by Council in 2014. We will be recommending, as you'll see, a few service level increases in the operating budget, including some additional trips for our accessible transportation service, some additional paramedic hours, service hours, because of an increase in 911 calls, extended hours for a period of the year at our some of our CRCs, some additional childcare subsidies. And on the capital side, it's very much, again, a budget that looks at maintaining the state of good repair, some money for growth and other council priorities, but really allowing us to continue the work that's already underway or planned. And finally, on the utility side, we will be recommending an increase in the utility rate, and you'll see it's driven by three things. One is an increase in reserve contributions, again for state of good repair for our water and wastewater infrastructure, some operational cost increases, and the impact of water conservation and declining water use on revenues. In summary, the regional budget as presented will, if adopted as presented, will result in a 0.8% tax increase and a utility rate increase of 7%. The tax increase is in line with inflation, and the utility rate, if adopted at 7%, still remains the lowest in the GTA. So with that, Mr. Chairman, I'll hand it over to Stephen to start getting into the details.
Thank you. Welcome, Steve.
Yep, we're on. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair and David and members of Council. Good afternoon. With me today is Rob Elliott, Director of Business and Financial Planning, who will be helping me with today's presentation. Just to build on David's comments, Peel is facing a changing and dynamic environment, resulting in complex community issues and increased program pressures. Solutions will require longer-term integrated planning, increased partnerships, new ways of conducting business in order to continue to meet priority community needs or needs in the community, while also recognizing the limited appetite for tax increases. Let me start by providing the bottom line impact of the proposed 2015 budget on the average property tax and utility rate payer. As shown on the top of this slide, the 2015 tax-supported budget proposes a 0.8% property tax increase, which is recovered through the property tax bill. This represents an increase of $33 for the average home in Peel, assessed at $452,500. The average small business, assessed at $534,000, will see an increase of $58. The bottom portion of the slide outlines the 2015 utility rate budget, which proposes a 7% rate increase, recovered through the utility bills for those on municipal water supply. The impact on the average household with annual consumption of 310 cubic meters is $39. The average small business with consumption of 730 cubic meters will see an increase of $98. The next slides will summarize the pressures behind the proposed tax and utility rate increases. This slide provides an overview of the total proposed 2015 budget of $2.4 billion, which can be further broken down into $2 billion for operating and $0.4 billion for capital. Let's first look at the tax-supported side on the left. Tax-supported budget pressures after assessment growth, but before provincial upload, include 1.3% for operational pressures, 1% to sustain the capital program, for an overall tax-supported budget pressures of 2.3%. After applying the 2015 phase-in benefit of upload of 0.7%, the increase in the net budget levy drops to 1.6%, equivalent to the target established by Council in 2014. You will see an additional 0.3%, reflecting a shift in responsibilities from area municipalities to the region in the transportation program through the work of the Arterial Roads Review. Costs related to this transfer are now reflected in the region's budget rather than that of the lower tiers. This brings the net levy increase to 1.86%, or rounded to 1.9. Peel accounts for 42% of the average property tax bill, resulting in a tax rate impact of 0.8%. Moving to the utility rate supported, or left side of the slide, the utility rate supported budget proposes an increase of 7%, including 1.5% for operational pressures, 2% for volume adjustment, and 3.5% to sustain the capital program. The 7% increase is consistent with last year's forecast for 2015. This slide shows at a high level what the average residential property tax bill funds. On average, Peel Region services represent 42% of the tax bill. Lower tier municipal services account for 37%, while the education system amounts to 21% of the average residential tax bill. Please note that for the past 16 years, the education portion of the residential property tax bill has not increased. The next two slides will provide Council with an overview of the region's proposed 2015 operating budget of $2 billion, which can be further broken down into $472 million for externally financed organizations, and $1.57 billion for all regionally controlled programs, including both property tax and utility rate supported. Externally financed organizations includes $415 million for police services, which includes the budgets for both Peel Regional Police and the Ontario Provincial Police, $39 million for conservation authorities, and $18 million for the services of the Municipal Property Assessment Corporation, commonly known as MPAC. Both police and conservation authorities have separate boards who review their budgets prior to submission to the region. These boards include representation from regional council. MPAC is funded by single tier and upper tier municipalities according to a formula set in legislation. As you can see on this slide, 46% of the regional budget is funded through property taxes. The utility rate represents 16% of our revenue and is fully funded through utility rates or user fees. You will see that the 24% of our budget is funded by grants and subsidies, since many of our programs are provincially mandated and have some form of cost-sharing arrangement in place. The other component at 14% includes all other user fees, interest, income, contributions from reserves, as well as development-related revenues. This chart provides a high-level perspective of the total labor costs relative to overall regionally controlled program expenditures of $1.6 billion. It excludes externally financed organizations. Labor costs represent 28%, or $441 million of the regionally controlled budget for 2015, representing a 1.5% increase over the 2014 budget. Within the labor cost component, $135 million is funded by the program through program grants and subsidies in the areas such as Ontario Works, paramedic services, early learning and childcare, public health, and long-term care. A further $59 million of Peel's labor costs is funded through the utility rate, while the remaining $247 million, representing 16% of the total regionally controlled budget, is funded through the property taxes. This slide provides perspective on Peel's regionally controlled program non-labor related costs, or the 72% of the chart on the previous slide. 36%, or $405 million, for grants and subsidies reflects Peel's role as a service manager for housing and early learning and childcare, as well as providing social assistance payments. A further 24%, or $271 million, funds capital reserve contributions to maintain Peel's estimated $19 billion infrastructure investment in a state of good repair. 17%, or $188 million, represent services contracted out, such as waste collection and disposal, and water and wastewater treatment. Other program-related costs make up the remaining 23%, or $260 million, of the regionally controlled budget, and include energy costs of $47 million and debt financing costs totaling $99.7 million. The 2015 budget proposes a 1.1% reduction in staff complement for regionally controlled programs. The reduction in staff complement reflects Council's decision to transition from direct delivery of childcare to fee subsidies, serving more children. 2015 represents the final phase-in of this initiative. Reduction of 73 positions is partially offset by priority additions of 21 for a net budget reduction of 47 positions. The next few slides will focus on changes to Peel's 2015 tax-supported operating budget. Peel's long-term financial planning strategy is built on 9 financial principles, including respect for the taxpayer, to support Peel's overall financial sustainability. At the time the 2014 budget was developed, staff were forecasting a 2.9% net levy budget increase in 2015, as shown in the first column of the numbers on the bottom of the slide. As part of Peel's annual budget process, on April 10, 2014, Council directed regional staff and external agencies to develop their 2015 budget at 1.3% less than forecast, with an overall net levy increase of 1.6%. As shown on this slide, all organizations, excluding Halton Conservation Authority, which makes up a very small portion of the overall tax-supported budget, have delivered budgets that are lower than their forecast from a year ago. By the way, Halton Conservation Authority's variance from forecast amounts to $3,000. After factoring in positive assessment growth of 1.69%, Council's target increase of 1.6% has been achieved. This slide provides a further breakdown of the overall 1.9% net tax levy increase after assessment growth. Regionally controlled programs increase of 0.9% includes the 1% capital infrastructure levy. External agencies represent a combined impact of 0.7%, bringing the total to 1.6%. As noted earlier, the impact of the arterial roads rationalization added an additional 0.3% to Peel's overall net levy budget increase for 1.9%. This slide summarizes the 2015 budget pressures for all tax-supported programs, including regionally controlled programs and external agencies. External agencies consist of police services, conservation authorities, and the Municipal Property Assessment Corporation. This chart shows total pressures of $38.2 million, which can be further broken down into $23.9 million for regionally controlled and $14.3 million for external agencies. The $23.9 million for regionally controlled includes $8.5 million to provide 2014 services to a 2015 population, $1.5 million in new operating costs directly related to previous capital investment decisions of Council, $2.4 million in service demands, which are service level enhancements required to address priority needs in the community, and $2.5 million for the work of the Arterial Roads Review. Also included under pressures is a $9 million increase in reserve contributions for capital, equivalent to a 1% net property tax budget increase. Over the next few slides, I will describe in further detail the pressures listed on this chart. This slide highlights the first of those numbers, the $8.5 million cost to provide 2014 service levels to the 2015 population for regionally controlled programs. Highlights include inflationary pressures of $6 million, including $2.6 million to reflect lower supplementary property taxes, operating contract increases in waste management, transportation, as well as community investment agency contracts. $0.4 million for waste management household growth of curbside and multi-residential collection. $1.4 million for the annualization of prior council decisions to support ongoing operations. For example, the new paramedic service hours added in 2014. Labor costs of $4.4 million. These costs are partially mitigated by reduced expenditures totaling $3.7 million. Examples include $1.7 million savings in homelessness and employment programs, lower wholesale drug prices with paramedic vendors totaling $368,000, a reconfiguration of health services communication support with savings of $494,000, and a $300,000 reduction due to the new CRM platform that Gilbert spoke about this morning. So it is actually coming out of our budget as we're starting to implement some of these. A full list of the items making up the $7 million can be found in Summary 2 of the 2015 Consolidated Budget document. The next few slides will summarize service demands of $6.4 million, including $1.5 million related to previously approved capital works and $4.9 million in operating priorities. This slide presents the details of capital-induced service demands of $1.5 million. In paramedic services, there is a $700,000 operating cost for Fern Forest Reporting Station, specifically for the Make Ready program, and 1 FTE to administer the operations. A $100,000 increase in operations for transportation infrastructure for items such as additional lane kilometers and traffic signals. Operating expenses of $500,000 to operate additional program space at PAMA. And $200,000 for operating expenses for the new data center being shared with Peel Police at the Fern Forest Paramedic Station. The next two slides will summarize new operational service demands totaling $4.9 million. An increase of $0.9 million to support 100 rent supplements and housing options. $468,000 to service paramedic call volume growth. $50,000 to meet revisions to the Immunization Schools Pupil Act requiring students to be immunized against 3 additional diseases. $600,000 to support 43,000 new accessible transportation trips, with 23,500 being converted to conventional transit and the remaining 19,500 trips through regional accessible transportation services. And 1 permanent FTE for the implementation of the goods movement strategy with no additional cost, as the contract FTE and funding were previously approved by Council. As reported to Council on January 22nd, significant savings can be achieved by providing property acquisitions through in-house resources. The cost of property acquisitions will continue to be funded through capital. Following a pilot in 2014, $345,000 is being requested for extended hours of operation at the Battlefort and Brampton Community Recycling Centers from May to October. Operational service demands total $2.4 million. As noted previously, recommendations from the Arterial Roads Rationalization Review has a 2015 operating budget impact of $2.5 million, and it includes $2.2 million to provide servicing of 8,800 streetlights in the Region of Peel right-of-way, $0.2 million for the implementation of advanced traffic management system in partnership with the City of Mississauga, and $0.1 million for the maintenance of the new Emilco Parkway. In summary, the 2015 budget includes $6.4 million in service pressures, $1.5 million related to previously approved capital works, and $4.9 million in operating priorities. This slide summarizes the $23.9 million pressures impacting regionally controlled programs and highlights the $14.3 million budget pressures facing Peel's externally financed organizations. The police staff or services will provide you with the drivers behind their pressures shortly. And the 3 conservation authorities will present their budgets on February 19th. Having now reviewed all of the pressures on the left side, we will now focus on the funding sources presented on the right side of this table. The property taxpayer continues to benefit from the changes in provincial cost shares on Ontario Works social assistance costs to the tune of $4.5 million. In addition, police services budgets benefit from the partial upload of court, security, and prisoner transport costs, which is currently estimated at $1.4 million, for a total upload benefit in 2015 of $5.9 million. After tax assessment growth of 1.69%, or $15.2 million, revenue increases totaled $21.1 million. After applying that $21.1 million revenue increase to the pressures of $38.2 million, a gap of $17.1 million remains. This gap is funded through a 0.8% property tax increase. This slide outlines where your 2015 regional tax dollars will be spent for each $100,000 in residential assessment. The change for $100,000 in assessment is $7.30. The orange bars at the top represent the externally financed organizations, while the green bars represent all other regional programs. The arrows and numbers shown at the end of the bars highlight the year-over-year differences. In total, the year-over-year change is a net increase of $33 for a household assessed at $452,500. The next few slides will provide an overview of the utility rate-supported 2015 budget. This slide summarizes the 2015 budget pressures for utility rate-supported programs at $14.9 million, inclusive of a $9.9 million increase for capital infrastructure requirements, which I will speak to later in the presentation. Total program pressures of $14.9 million, or 5%, combined with a 2% adjustment for billed volume, results in an overall average utility rate increase of 7%. Over the next few slides, we will describe in further details the pressures listed on this chart. The cost of delivering 2014 service levels in 2015 includes $4.7 million and will service an estimated 4,750 new customers. The drivers behind the $4.7 million increase include inflationary pressures of $700,000, an Aqua contract increase of $1.7 million, chemical supplies and natural gas cost increases of $1 million, and labor costs totaling $1.3 million. While not noted on this slide, the region has been able to absorb increases in electricity rates within the existing budget, estimated at $3 million, through energy conservation and demand management initiatives. This slide summarizes the utility rate program operating pressures, or service demands. The region requires 2 FTEs funded through capital for additional IT personnel to support the new water billing system. $300,000 and 3 FTE are required to implement increased service level requirements by the On-One Call Act. In summary, the 2015 utility budget includes $5 million in total pressures, $300,000 related to legislated service demands, and $4.7 million in base pressures. And I'll walk through this slide a little bit slowly. As shown on the left side of this chart, the utility rate program has experienced revenue shortfalls over the past 2 years of $10.7 million in 2013 and an estimated $8.6 million in 2014. The right side of the slide shows that Peel's utility rate costs are primarily, or 87%, fixed, as the program is infrastructure intensive. When billed volumes decline, there is little ability to affect or reduce the operating costs. Peel's water rates are calculated using a 100% variable methodology. For example, you pay for what you consume, and there is no fixed or block rate charge in place to cover fixed system costs. To cover the revenue shortfall, the 2015 budget proposes a 2% adjustment to reflect the lower billed volume. Dan Lebrecht, Commissioner of Public Works, will provide further details on the utility rate supported program, including changing consumption patterns, on February 19th. This chart shows the overall impact of the proposed 2015 regional utility rate supported budget on the average resident and small business in Peel. This slide compares Peel's proposed 2015 utility bill to other municipalities based on their 2014 or 2015 rates. With the proposed 7% increase, Peel's average residential water bill will remain well below that of neighboring municipalities even before factoring in 2015 increases. I'll now shift to the capital program and provide more information on the 2015 capital budget. In addition to the one-year capital budget, the region prepares a 9-year forecast, which is approved by council in principle. Planning beyond the single budget year allows the region to assess the sustainability of future plans. The 2015 to 2024 capital plan, at approximately $5.1 billion, can be further broken down into $2.4 billion, or 46%, for regionally controlled tax-supported capital, $0.3 billion, or 6%, for external agencies, namely Peel Police, and $2.5 billion, or 48%, for utility-supported programs. As noted on the bottom of the chart, the 10-year capital plan will be funded 40% from development charges, 57% by internal reserves, and 3% through external funding sources. This slide highlights the 2015 to 2024 tax-supported capital plan of $2.4 billion for regionally controlled programs. As noted on the bottom of this chart, the 10-year capital plan will be funded 39% from development charges, 57% by internal reserves, and 4% through external funding sources. This slide highlights the 2015 to 2024 utility-supported capital plan, which is valued at $2.5 billion. The water program, at $1.6 billion, represents 63% of the capital plan. Wastewater capital, at $861 million, represents 35%, while the remaining balance includes the provision of meter replacements and technology supports for the utility rate-supported programs. As noted on the bottom of this chart, the 10-year capital plan will be funded 44% from development charges and 55% by internal reserves. Capital planning starts with capital-related financial management principles included in our long-term financial planning strategy. First, assets should be maintained in a state of good repair. The next principle is that the capital plan needs to be sustainable. Non-DC growth and other council priorities are included where the capital and future operating costs are sustainable and affordable. Finally, growth pays for growth to the extent possible under current legislation. This slide shows how the regionally controlled capital budget or capital plan of $4.9 billion is classified between maintaining a state of good repair at $2 billion or 41%, non-DC growth and council priorities at $0.9 billion or 18%, and DC funded growth also at $2 billion and 41%. The next few slides will provide more detail on the policy directions which support the capital plan investments described on this slide. First, this slide speaks to maintaining Peel's infrastructure, which has an estimated replacement value of $19 billion. The 10-year capital plan includes $2 billion for state of good repair. As reported to Council in January, Peel's overall infrastructure is in a good state of repair. Peel's risk-based corporate asset management strategy informs capital expenditure priorities, and the $2 billion is required in order to continue to keep the overall infrastructure in good condition. The non-DC growth and council priorities category of capital investments within the capital plan includes $146 million in growth-related infrastructure not included under current DC legislation. For example, waste infrastructure and administrative facilities, a required 10% reduction in portion not covered due to the 10-year service rule contained in the legislation. Investments which support council's priority outcomes include strategies to achieve waste diversion, affordable housing and homelessness strategy, the paramedic facility program, improving communities' health through active transportation, and the Lakeview waterfront connection. Financing Peel's capital plan is multifaceted and aligned to Council's financial principles in the long-term financial planning strategy. Financing Peel's state of good repair follows a philosophy as pay-as-we-go, using available reserves funded through the infrastructure levy. As presented to Council on January 22, 2015, in the report entitled Overview and Update on the Status of Reserves, current reserves and existing annual reserve contributions are insufficient to fund the 2015 to 2024 tax-supported capital plan. The left side of this chart shows the funding gap in the tax-supported regionally controlled capital program. The bar on the left side indicates that the funding, which will need to come from reserves to pay for the $1.45 billion non-DC capital program. The green bar on the right side indicates the amount we expect to have in reserves if we maintain annual capital reserve contributions at current levels. Without increasing reserve contributions, we will have a $55 million gap, the little orange bar on the top. The impact of continuing to increase reserve contributions will be the equivalent of a 1% net budget increase in 2015 to reduce this unfunded gap. Now moving to the right side of the chart for the utility rate supported program. As presented to Council on January 22nd, current reserve contributions and existing capital reserves are insufficient to fund the 2015 to 2034 or 20-year utility supported capital requirements. The bar on the left side indicates the funding which will need to come from reserves to pay for the $4.69 billion in non-DC capital program over the next 20 years. The green bar on the right side indicates the amount which we expect to have in reserves if we maintain annual capital contributions at current levels. Without increasing reserve contributions, we will have roughly a $3.24 billion available, or we will have $3.24 billion available, leaving a gap of $1.45 billion. This slide shows the impact of increasing annual capital contributions by the equivalent of a 3.5% utility rate increase in 2015 and in each of the next 5 years required to close the gap. Alternatively, a one-time increase of 18% would close the gap. This slide provides examples of major projects in the 10-year plan which are funded from development charges, including the Victoria Reservoir and Transmission, GE Booth Treatment Plant expansion, Highway 50 improvements, and affordable housing development. As noted on in my January 22nd Council presentation, update on Peel's financial performance, Peel utilizes debt as part of its comprehensive capital financing strategy. As this slide shows, Peel's current debt levels are well within provincial limits. Based on the adequacy of Peel's current reserves and DC reserve funds, additional debt will not be required in 2015. The 2015 capital budget at approximately $0.4 billion or $431 million can be further broken down into $182 million or 42% for regionally controlled tax-supported capital, $59 million or 14% for external agencies, Peel Regional Police, and $190 million or 44% for utility supported. This represents the portion of the 10-year capital plan which Council is being asked to approve. Please note the utility rate supported capital of $190 million is $40 million lower than the draft 2015 budget document circulated to Council in January. During the last term, Council approved the buyback of system capacity from the region of York. As staff worked through the technical details of this very complex arrangement, we determined that the draft 2015 capital budget overestimated the impact. As noted on the bottom of this chart, the capital budget will be funded 20% from development charges, 79% from reserves, and 1% through external funding sources. Within each program, the capital budget supports maintaining a state of good repair, DC-funded growth capital, and non-DC growth and/or council priorities. Some of these projects are not new projects, but represent the next phase of funding for existing projects as they advance through the stages of completion. More detail on the capital budget will be included in the departmental and Peel Police presentations by the Commissioners and Police Services respectively. The next few slides will summarize the overall impact of the 2015 budget. This slide summarizes the proposed 2015 budget for both tax and utility programs as compared to the 2015 forecast at the time of the 2014 budget development. This chart shows the impact of the proposed 0.8% property tax increase on the average household and small business in Peel before and after the benefit of provincial upload. A 0.8% property tax increase equates to a $33 increase per household based on an average assessed value of $452,500. After incorporating the increase of $33, the regional portion of the property tax bill will be $1,816. The impact to a small business with an annual assessed value of $534,000 is also provided on this slide. To this, one must add the cost of funding education and the city or town services. This slide shows Peel's overall tax impact over the past years has remained low due in part to provincial uploads. The continued phase-in of provincial upload allows both regional and area municipal councils to address priority needs in the community while keeping tax increases reasonable. This slide shows the bottom line impact on the average residential tax bill of council decisions on area and regional budgets under 5 different scenarios. For simplicity purposes, this chart utilizes the average composition of the Peel tax bill to calculate the overall increase. This translates into a 42% regional portion, 37.5% area municipal portion, and 20.5% education portion. Actual shares will vary from municipality to municipality. All 5 scenarios show the impact of a 1.9% net region budget increase and assume no change in the education portion. With respect to the increases for the area municipal portion, we look at the impact of a 2%, 3%, 4%, 5%, and 6% respectively. When combined with Peel's proposed increase of 0.8%, the overall average residential tax increase ranges from 1.6% to 3.1%. From year to year, the service level pressures may vary from one tier of municipal government to another, but by focusing on the bottom line impact to the single taxpayer, Council can ensure that the overall increase remains affordable. And finally, here is a picture of how your tax dollars support regional services in your community. This slide highlights our planned next steps. We will hear today from Peel Regional Police and Ontario Provincial Police. On February 19th, you will hear from the 3 conservation authorities and begin budget presentations from our regional controlled programs. Thank you. This concludes my presentation.
Thank you. Are there any questions with respect to the presentation? And just remind council that nothing's being approved today. We're just receiving the information. And as Steve has said, we'll be dealing with both Peel Regional Police and the OPP today as well. Councillor Fonseca. Thanks, Steve.
Thank you, through you, Mr. Chair. Just a quick comment. I just wanted to say thank you for sending out the information on the provincial upload over the next number of years and how that factors into the short-term and the longer-term budgeting. I think that information was very useful, and also explaining further the challenges within the utilities on the fixed cost expenses. I just want to say thank you, and I'm happy to move receipt of the presentation.
And seconded by Councillor Raz. No question? Oh, go ahead.
Nice try, though. Good try. On slide 35, when it comes to overlap and duplication between the lower tier municipality, I was just wondering, can you expand a little bit, or maybe that'll come under Dan's presentation, for the $32 million for the active transportation?
So and Dan can probably provide more details next week, but through the last term of council, we have an active transportation program established, and maybe I'll let Dan speak to how it works with the area municipalities, but we are putting in place active transportation components, and this is the funding source for it. But maybe Dan can speak to the specifics behind the work with the area municipalities.
Well, you know what, if Dan, you can when you do your presentation, if you can address some of those issues, and maybe I have some further questions I can ask you offline, but I just want to, we just passed the Mississauga budget, and when we look at all of the things that we're planning, it seems like there is a little bit of overlap there, so I have some concerns.
Okay.
Thanks. And I will move or second the report.
Councillor, thank you. Councillor Tovey.
Yes, thank you. It was a great presentation. Thanks a lot for that. I just wondered, and I might have missed it, but what % of our budget do we actually get from the federal and provincial government combined?
We don't have that information in the presentation, but typically from a resident or individual who's paying taxes, 9% would go to the municipalities and the rest would go to the upper tiers of government.
No, I mean like of our budget.
Of our budget, our revenue source. I don't know that I would have it broken down. We get very little from the federal government, Most
Yeah.
of our subsidies would come through the provincial government.
Yeah, I'd be curious to find out what that percentage is, because I know in Toronto's 2015 budget, it's 18% from the province and 1% from the federal government.
We can get that breakdown.
So it'd be really interesting to see how we compare with whether or not we're getting our share. I mean, we know we're not, but it'd be nice to know how little we're not getting. And the other question, I guess, would be for Dan is, do you know how much we're billing in water and wastewater this year, or this past year, total?
I couldn't give you the final 2014 number, but it's in the range of $330 million.
Great, thank you. Good business, Dan, thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Miles.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just wanted to recognize that over the last few years, and this is more for the newer members of council, the region has worked really in cooperation with the area municipalities so that we can keep our budgets basically below the rate of inflation. And we've been able to do that because of the provincial upload of services. So we've had wiggle room at the region, and the region have been really great at recognizing that and assisting us at the municipal level where we don't have that. So I'm going to jump in with 2 feet, because there are 2 areas of duplication that I see that we need to look at for the future. And you know, we went out on a limb last term, looked at early learning and childcare, and as a result of we weren't getting out of the business, but getting out of actually providing programs, we improved the system and we reduced our costs. And you're going to see more about that when you look at human services. But the 2 areas that continue to be a concern to me is the fact that we have 4 311 call centers. Absolute duplication. And, you know, when we started 311, everybody was like, it was a new program. But right now, somebody calls 311, someone picks it up. It could be a city person, it could be a region person. They ask where the service is from, and then the call is directed. That's absolutely a duplication, and we need to be looking at it. So I would suggest that through this budget process, it isn't something that we want to tackle during this budget year, but that we give direction to our staff to do some due diligence and come back to council with a look at that particular service and what kind of cost savings, if there are any, that we would realize if we had one call center for the region of Peel. The other one, the chief of police, the chief of fire, and our chairman are going to also understand where I'm coming from is that we have 2 call centers at Peel Regional Police. We have a police call center and a fire call center. And that's a more difficult one, I think, to tackle, but I don't think it's beyond our staff to take a look at that. Call comes in and then it's sent to the right. Again, it's all the same taxpayer that is paying for these services, and you know, we have to. It's getting. I know at the City of Brampton, it's getting more and more difficult for us to continue to deliver quality services within that rate of inflation. So it's our responsibility as members of council to look for those cost savings, and I know they're going to be tough, but I think those are 2 that I would like to see the region, in cooperation with the area municipalities, chief of police and fire, take a look at over 2015 to see whether or not we should be making some changes for the 2016 budget. So at the appropriate time, Mr. Chairman, I would like to put those resolutions on the floor, and I would ask perhaps some assistance from our staff to ensure that the appropriate wording is before council when they consider it.
Mr. Chairman, if it's all right with council, what we'll do when we bring the final budget recommendations after the discussions, we can include those and any other supplementary recommendations for council to vote on.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Councillor Fonseca.
Yeah, just briefly, I had asked, I think it was at the city, I can't remember if it was at the city or at the region or at both, but I had asked for a review of, in the Works Department, for both the region and the local municipalities to look at where they could find efficiencies when it comes to paving costs when works are done. So, for example, if on a street there's local water main work being done, the region right now temporarily does the patch paving, and then the city comes in and does the paving. So that was an area I'd asked that I think I might have asked it at the requested for works to the works departments in both the lower tier and the region to look together where they could find efficiencies and perhaps look at either the region or the local level taking on paving, like taking on that one responsibility, not only from a cost saving standpoint for from the actual work that's being done, but also from a communication standpoint to the resident, to the homeowners. So I don't know if that could be included here, if that was going to come up in the presentation that you were doing, Dan, of the local department.
If I could, Mr. Chairman, just to respond to that comment, that is something we were following up with the city. We weren't building it into the budget. It's really more a operational process review, but we can bring you back an update on that, and if you think it warrants it, we can bring it back to council.
Okay, that's great. Thank you.
Just if I could, Mr. Chair.
Yeah,
just
please
to
do.
Councillor Tovey's question, Ellie's back in the room. 24% of the budget today is funded from either the federal government or provincial government.
That's impressive. Getting more than Toronto.
Oh, can I just jump in for a second?
Yeah.
Sorry. Mr. Chairman, we get what would appear to be a larger portion than Toronto because we're not delivering all of the same services Toronto is. You'd have to put Mississauga, for example, and the region together to get the equivalent. Yeah. Remember, we're delivering a lot of cost-shared programs, so the provincial subsidies would look larger if you just looked at the regional level. So it's perhaps not quite the good news that it first appeared.
Right now, but
Yes,
that's
we
a
can-
great question, and I'd like to understand it a little better.
Yes, we could put together
Thank you. For another day.
information.
Thank you.
Yeah, if we could do that, that'd be
Yeah.
very interesting. Thank you.
No, it's a very good point, Councillor Tovey. Seeing no one else on the list, I do have a motion of receipt from Councillor Fonseca, seconded by Councillor Raz. All in favor? Opposed, if any? Carried. Thanks, Steve and David. Just before we start the police budget presentation, I just wanted to say that Lori Williamson, Chair of the Police Services Board, could not attend today because of a long-standing engagement out of the country representing former owners of GM car dealerships. I know he's been in constant contact with the Chief throughout as the police service prepared its presentation. And I would also note that in addition to myself as Vice Chair of the board, we also have Mayor Crombie and Mayor Jeffrey present, who received a full briefing of the budget on January the 23rd. So with that, I'd like to turn it over to Chief Evans and her staff, and if you'd be kind enough, Chief, to introduce who's all with you today.
Good afternoon. I hope I didn't walk in with a big crowd there. I apologize if I did. So, and I can tell you, actually, just as not too long ago, a few minutes ago, I received a message from Chair Williamson wishing me luck on my presentation. So he didn't tell me what the temperature was like. So I appreciate him not doing that. I have the Executive Director of our Police Services Board, Mr. Fred Bureau, here as well as one of the managers, Lee Steenhook. I have the 3 Deputy Chiefs, Brian Adams, who's in charge of Operation Support, which is Special Services, Homicide, Fraud. I have Dave Jarvis, the Middle Deputy Chief, in charge of Corporate Services, Finance, Human Resources. I have Deputy Chief Chris McCord, who's in charge of Field Operations, Communications, and the Courthouse. I then have my, do you notice my finance people are sitting closer to me to run down and ask me, so the Director of Finance, Mark Figueredo, Manager of Finance, Carrie Lynn Holmes, Bev Mullins, our Associate Administrator, and Joanne McPhail from Corporate Planning. So I brought a big team. I also have, Madam Clerk, I will be sending these out electronically. I think most of you would recognize that we send out weekly corporate communications from Peel Police. So I'm asking that those be then going to be sent out again just to give you updates on what's going on with the police department. So I brought hard copies because I understand you haven't got them lately. So we're going to try and start sending them out electronically again just to give you an update on what's going on in your neighborhood, and that way it gives you context as to what's going on a weekly basis with the police. So good afternoon. I've got think 19 slides to take us through here, so I recognize that I'm running a bit late for everyone, so I know it's been a busy day for you as well. Thank you very much. So I will... let's do this. Next slide. Peel Regional Police remains committed in delivering quality services and ensuring accountability and fiscal responsibility. In 2014, we struck our new strategic plan, which is based on extensive input involving community surveys as well as community workshops. It serves as a roadmap for our organization in meeting our goals and provides a framework for allocating resources to address our current and our future challenges. And it also ensures that we are working efficiently and effectively. Our 2015 budget presented today is consistent with management plans, our strategies, and our initiatives, and with support the overall success of our strategic plan and ensuring our vision for a safer community together. The 2015 net budget submitted for consideration totals $360.9 million. It meets Council's requested target. And in meeting the target, the budget, $5.2 million is being brought forward than the original 2015 budget forecast. The budget request results in a regional tax levy increase of 0.59%. This slide is a high-level view of the 2015 net budget. 9/10, as you can see, of our police budget is based on wages and benefits. Our operating expenses represent only 1%. And the key drivers for the operating budget are fuel, uniform and equipment, hydro, and software maintenance. And then we have reserve contributions, which equal 5.3% of our budget, or $19 million. As you can see, with wages totaling 93.7% of our budget, this leaves very flexible room with very little flexibility, I should say, in the remaining 6.3% of our budget. This slide demonstrates that historically, the budget increases for Peel Regional Police have been going down, and as you can see in 2015, 3.2% is our lowest increase since 1997, actually. The $5.4 million budget increase is broken down as follows. $10.2 million is going to be focused on wages and benefits, as well as inflation and other capital impacts on current. We are requesting 20 frontline officers, which equals out to $3.3 million. And we also take into account that every year we do a line-by-line budget looking for efficiencies, and they're represented in the budget section of $0.8 million. We have been doing fleet service savings. A few years ago, we went into the pre-owned vehicles, and we do our own collision repair with the region as well. So that's $162,000 savings from that. As part of my ongoing organizational review with retirements and people moving on to other organizations, we are looking at always looking at new ways to do our business. And last year, when one of the staff superintendents retired, I downgraded that position to a superintendent position. We also realized savings with regard to our tactical unit and looking at the various weapons. The tactical unit we're looking at, we've removed 3 weapon systems down to 1 system, and that realized the savings as well. So those are some of the budget efficiencies that resulted in the $0.8 million. As you can see, we're into our 4th year of a 7-year phase-in. Committed by the province for the court security and prisoner upload, and I'll be speaking to more about that upload later on in slides. Assessment revenue is $5.9 million, and at this time we are using the region's assessment of the 1.69 to draw that. So, in the next few slides, I'm going to talk about why we need the additional 20 officers for this year's budget. So while we had originally forecasted for 22 original officers, I'm now requesting just an increase of 20. In reviewing, we were able to find efficiencies related to, we civilianized 1 supervisor or uniformed supervisor position in the Communications Bureau to a civilian position, and we also reallocated a sergeant from administrative support back to frontline. So the factors displayed on this slide directly impact on frontline demands and the volume units required to effectively respond to calls for service. So you'll note that the increase of the 20 officers is actually in line with the 2015 projected increase in number of households, population, and registered vehicles. The cost of hiring an additional 20 officers annually equals $3.3 million. The forecasted annual growth in assessment revenue of 1.69%, or the $5.9 million, more than offsets the cost of these additional frontline officers in order to meet growth demands. And over the next few slides, I will provide an overview of the current situation with respect to the workload and the pressures which demonstrate our need for 20 additional growth officers. And I thought it was important to include the population and the registered vehicles. Last year, we lost 28 citizens of the region of Peel to fatalities. That was an increase from 23 lost fatalities in 2013. Last year, it was 28. So we still seem to be having an increase in motor vehicle collisions causing fatalities in the region. From 2013 to 2014, we've seen increases, as you can see, for break-in enters and businesses. We've also seen an increase in bail violations and fail to appears. Now, bail violations and fail to appears are the offenders that are charged by police, are sent to court, and then are released on a remand or released with bail conditions. And now we have officers then following up on these offenders to see if they're complying with their conditions of their release. And most often than not, they're not. Hence, they're being rearrested and processed through the court again. So you can see those are on the increase. There's been an increase in frauds by 12.9%. And I know I've often spoke before Regional Council with respect to the request for assistance with people dealing with mental illness. Those continue to be on the increase. And we're seeing a small increase in the missing juveniles, and I think it's underestimated the amount of time that police and the amount of number of officers that actually are spent responding to these missing juvenile cases. So. In 2014, Peel Regional Police also conducted a survey of victims of commercial break-and enters to measure their satisfaction level and to compile feedback with respect to those, because we saw the increase in the business break-and enters. Approximately 900 businesses in Brampton and Mississauga were victims when I provided a survey, and we're just analyzing those results. But saying that the increases, I'm also pleased to see that drug occurrences are down. Although drug occurrences overall are down, we are still seeing an increase in possession of heroin, which is a higher end drug than the marijuana. Crimes against persons are down. Sex assaults, not including sex assaults, are down, and robberies are down. So. The percentage of Priority 1 calls, the Priority 1 calls being dispatched out of the communication center or the immediate dispatch calls, they remain relatively the same, of 89% of Priority 1 calls also always require a second unit to attend. And a comparison of the data indicates that there's been a slight increase of Priority 2 calls, and Priority 2 calls are the calls that have to be dispatched within 5 minutes. Criminal charges were down, and we continue to see that trend from 2013 to 2014. So there was 24,954 criminal charges laid in 2013, and in 2014 there was an overall decrease of 5%. Drug charges are relatively remaining the same. Shootings, there has been a decline in shootings. But the decline is still concerning. The fact that in 2013 we had 82 shootings in the region, and in 2014 we had 74. And last year we had 9 homicides, but we had 629 firearms seized. So those are still numbers and investigations that take a lot of time to do and are very complex and are very concerning for safety. So we're looking for efficiencies. So in June of this year, we developed a call diversion unit. So we are always looking for better ways to serve the community. So we have the online reporting that people can go online and report things on a computer. Now we have the call diversion unit. So this was launched on June 19th. So this is an alternative and an effective way for officers to speak to people who want to make complaints and make police reports. So as a result of this new call diversion unit, you can see almost 3,800 calls have been diverted. So this allows more officers who are on the street actually to respond to other calls, and that these officers are dealing with calls that can be handled by the phone. The examples of these type of calls are thefts, property loss, small property damage, stolen autos, and these officers are accommodated officers. So currently we have 64 police officers that have to be accommodated. So if they're not allowed to go out on the road and do full duties as police officers. So we were looking for ways to use them in an effective manner and to say this is what we've got. So each division has a call diversion unit, and these officers are working to doing police calls on this. So this seems to be a very successful unit. We also conducted as mentioned earlier, as looking at the ways we do business, the neighborhood policing unit and the youth education programs. Currently, we have 118 officers assigned to schools. So we have 14 in the Youth Education Bureau, we have 68 in the neighborhood policing unit, and we have 36 bike unit officers. So in 2014, we conducted a survey of the feeder and the secondary schools throughout the region, and you can see the results on the screen. Very positive results that we still have great positive working relationships with the schools. The schools agree the officers in the school assist in creating a safe learning environment, and their presence in reducing school occurrences, and that the officers and the students are working together, and that we find the students are reporting crime, and the positive relationships are difficult to measure, but I mean, very, very successful. The efficiencies and effectiveness is also measured in the fact that we are also in the grade schools. And you can see from the results in the survey, 94% of our schools are satisfied with the youth education programs. Constantly when we do our community survey, we're always seeing schools and the young people are still a priority for everyone. So our Youth Education Bureau offers youth education. We deliver prevention-based education through elementary and feeder schools. Our youth education officers are involved in several initiatives throughout the school year. 94% of the school are satisfied with the officers, and schools are indicating that they're informative, they're engaged, and they provide a safe learning environment for the students. One of our new proposals moving forward last year, when we came up with the new vision of a safer community together, we started working on a new community safety model. And for those familiar with the IMET, the team, this is an IMET that just provides more people working together. So it's an evidence-based approach that brings together government, police, community-based organizations, and other representatives together to work collaboratively to find local solutions. It supports the positioning of partners to address broader social issues. Community partners involved the both Safe Cities, the Region Appeal, executive management teams, regional city councilors, area residents, supportive housing appeal, and various other community groups. Currently there are 34 situations that have come forward for the Community Safety Hub, and examples, one example, I know they're working up in 22 Division. They've been experiencing Brampton issues related to prostitution and other criminal-related activity. So they began this collaborative with looking at the community safety team to address these issues, to identify the women who were the sex trade workers working in the area. 6 females have attended to receive assistance. 15 different agencies attended to provide support with respect to various housing, identification, mental health issues, and addiction. 2 of the females have been assisted through regeneration to obtain copies of birth certificates and health cards that they were unable to have before. And for the policing perspective, it's actually allowing us to have less contacts with these women on a criminal basis. I mean, this is one small example that's going to be a very strong partnership working in Brampton. In Mississauga, I was provided an example that in October, the city of Mississauga brought forward a following situation, whereas an elderly woman was living in a home that was uninhabitable, no power, no hydro, no heat, and deteriorating to the amount of mold. So I guess this woman was observed by neighbors always wandering the streets, alone late at night. She was isolated from her family. Her partner is recently deceased, and her children were not willing to help. So the situation was adopted by the hub table. So housing was involved, mental health and neglect, poverty, physical health, all these issues were looked at. The following agencies were involved. So it was Supportive Housing Appeal, Region Appeal Human Services, City of Mississauga, Canadian Mental Health Association, and Peel Police. So the collaboration, working together to try to address this woman's issues. So within 48 hours, all the partners convened. This woman has been located to a local hospital, and she's been considering the state of this woman's physical health and mental health and the pending hub. So the hub has really kind of gotten together to work together to save this woman's life. So other efficiencies and effectiveness. Originally implemented in 2011, the pre-owned program with regard to vehicle leases with regard to Peel Police. This involves both the surveillance and the undercover vehicles. Vehicles were pre-owned prior to that, so now we're buying pre-owned vehicles, and we're buying them and we're auctioning them off at a local wholesale house. We've expanded the program now to include the criminal investigation, the detective office bureaus vehicles, as well as the admin vehicles. So we're reducing our annual budget by $80,000. We have a collision repair center. So in 2011, we opened that collision repair center. We reduced the downtime of vehicles from 8 to 10 days to now to 5.5 working days, resulting in increased availability for the cruisers back out on the street. $250,000 was deferred in capital costs for refurbishing 10 motorcycles, as well as 16 bicycles, a trailer, and 2 of the historic vehicles. We also have a partnership with the Region Appeal Public Works Department and Ambulance Services. So we complete collision and damage repairs on the Peel Public Works and ambulance vehicles at a lower cost than any external vendor would. The paramedic services are also fueling their fleet vehicles at Peel Regional Police gas pumps, lowering their fuel costs. And from April until the end of December, we've realized a savings of $17,000 in fuel costs for ourselves, which is a benefit to the taxpayer. We also have a partnership with the fire department. For the past 8 years, Peel Regional Police has been able to split up the existing network cable lines to provide the fire communications. So the communication for the fire department, all the Brampton, Mississauga, and Caledon, have a network access to our Peel Police headquarters, and we were able to split the network cost of that, and that was a savings of $2,700 a month for the last 8 years. With the transition from our new communication center, that there was an upgrade to Bell to a more digital system that Peel Regional Police, the software developers, created and owned. So when somebody phones in 911 and they are on their cell phone, Peel Regional Police were able to identify their location from their cell phone. Bell has this ability to do this, but Bell would charge Peel Regional Police $15,000. So we were able to develop this in-house, and then we shared that with our fire department as well. So in 2014, you recall last year, we implemented our alarm program. So of the 9,900 calls were canceled, you can see that only 3% were actually valid alarms. Now, although we increased a cost recovery program this year, the focus of this alarm system was not to generate revenue. It was actually to try to reduce false alarms, because it was addressing the issue of the fact that officers were racing to alarm calls and that only 3% of the valid alarms. So we're actually seeing a positive decrease in that. So a comparison of the 2013 to the 2014 data would indicate that we've had a 16% decrease in false alarms since we've implemented this program. So this is definitely working. So. We're committed to seeking grant opportunities when available. As you can see, the community mobilization, the $103,000, that was started out with the Community Made in Peel, where we started our community model down at the Colonial Terrace. We were addressing all the crime areas down there, and that's expanded. We also received the grant for the Youth Cyber Safety Academy, which is operating out of the Peel Children's Safety Village. And I can tell you that cybercrime, the last 3 weeks, we've been hosting evening events down at 180 Dairy Road for parents and adults, and they have been sold out. I dropped in last week, and the auditorium, which seats 110 people, they're full and they're sold out. So people are waiting for more education on cybercrime. Our Youth in Policing initiative is a fabulous initiative that is a grant opportunity the provincial government provided us with a couple of years ago. This is where we get 15 youth, and these are identified with the officers from the school programs as well as the CAS. And they identify children living in at-risk communities, and they provide summer employment to work with Peel Regional Police. And I think the next little fight. So this was a Snapchat that we came across from one of the students this year when she finished. This is what she said: looking at myself, not even recognizing myself anymore. My summer, the most good life-changing experience I've ever had. The memory of this is what the direct source of all things I've accomplished in my life right now. I am truly blessed and thankful to Peel Regional Police. She was one of our summer students, worked for the IPI program, so that's been a real positive experience, both for the officers who actually get to work with these youth, as well as for the youth, who really have a different appreciation for what the police do after their eight weeks with us. We also get $25,000 for, that's for your surveillance equipment, and then hate crime and extreme, we get $10,000, and that's for use for training. In 2015, our grant funding totaled $13.9 million, representing $1.4 million increase. And it's primarily related to the third installment of the Provincial Court Security and Prisoner Escort funding. And although we are pleased to receive this $13.9 million, it should be noted that to run these programs, it actually cost Peel Regional Police $38.4 million. So the CPP program, if I take you through it, funds 124 frontline officers, and that's $30,000 per officer annually. And the SCOOP program, which has been going on, the Safer Communities 1,000 Officers program, has been operating since 1997, and that provides us for 25 officers with funding for $35,000 per officer. Court security, I think I've already spoken to. PAVIS, which is the provincial anti-violence strategy, which has now been made permanent by the province in 2012. This is where we see our STEP unit officers, our strategic and tactical enforcement officers out there doing, they're the ones who are usually doing all the local gang issues and all gun-related calls, and that's where we focus our efforts on for the PAVIS grant. Our ICE unit, which is an officer, which funds one officer, and that person is an undercover lurer. So they spend their time luring people on the internet who are sex offenders, who are pedophiles, and that's what they spend their time doing. So that's where the funding goes for that. And unfortunately, there is a need for that. Our firearms funds one area firearms officer at 100%, as well as a clerk at 75%. And then you see our RIDE program, and as you know from our RIDE program, our RIDE numbers remain the same, and still the average impaired age is still 37, 30 to 36 years old. So we've also experienced that we're being impacted by downloading pressures mainly related to our courts. So our additional courtrooms, a permanent addition of 2 additional courtrooms, we're going to be built at the Davis Court, along with 4 additional floors to address future demands. I think I've mentioned this before in future slides, or past presentations, that Brampton Courthouse is one of the busiest in Ontario, if not, now I'm understanding, if not in Canada. And the additional courtrooms right now, during the construction phase, it's going to have an impact on our judge and jury trials, and the fact is we're being notified that judge and jury trials may then be handled out in Kitchener, Milton, and Orangeville. So that means people who are witnesses to a trial and normally would just have to go to the Brampton Courthouse to testify, they're going to have to get to Kitchener, Milton, and Orangeville. And so the officers and the witnesses and all that will have an impact on that. So that'll have an impact on our budget as well. Our prisoner meals, several lawyers have been making formal court applications to get clients more food, alleging that the prisoner meals are not enough, do not provide them enough nutrition to allow them to properly defend themselves. So the provision of meals for prisoners right now is a Government of Ontario, the ministry responsibility. But however, none of the correctional facilities in this jurisdiction, namely Maplehurst, provide meals. So in other jurisdictions, I know from other chiefs, their prisoners, when they leave the detention center to go to courthouse for court that day, they're provided a lunch. That does not happen to Maplehurst. Last year, we spent over $84,000 in lunch meals, and this year we've had to budget it to $103,000. The Supreme Court of Canada came out with Regina versus Spencer. So the impact of this decision is having a huge impact on investigations going on. So the investigative time for officers and the threat of lost information. Previously, if everyone had a home phone and you could look up to find out where people live, now, and previous to the Spencer decision, people could submit a law enforcement request form. So if they were in a rush and they wanted to get information immediately with relation to information on a phone, they would have to submit a law enforcement request form. And they would get the information on that phone within hours. Right now, it takes 5 to 7 hours for the officer to write a production order. It then has to go to the JP's office, and they have to wait everywhere between 3 to 24 hours for the JP to review their production order. And once the production order is signed, they then have to get over to the telecompany, what could take up to 30 days for the telecompany to get back. So Regina versus Spencer is a big impact on investigations. And the average typical homicide investigation requires 80 subscriber requests. So 80 subscriber requests for a homicide investigation, and that's not including robbery investigations, kidnap investigations, and all the other investigations that we're doing. So this is having a huge financial impact on our investigative time. Court overtime last year was at $2.9 million. So, our conducted energy weapons, so this is the tasers. So over the past 3 years, there have been several legislative changes that made impact on the training with regard to the conducted energy weapons. So our training requirements have gone from 4 to 8 hours, and then increased recently from now 8 to 12 hours. So conducted energy weapons requalifications from 2 to 4 hours annually. So now we have to find time to get the officers off the road for those extra hours, and that's having a financial impact, as well as the fact is the officers are no longer on the roads doing calls because they have to get the additional training. The additional training and the financial impact to even purchase the additional holsters and the cartridges is over $46,000, but that doesn't take into the time being spent off the road. The Canadian Police Colleges, we're also seeing fees for training officers. We're seeing fees jump up from ranges from 10 to 30%, but some are more expensive. Like the drug investigative course increased by 72% this year. And advanced analytical training increased by 74%. So training is having an impact on our budgets as well. As we discussed earlier, we were able to reach the region's net levy target by 2015. Looking forward to 2016 to 2018, we are predicting tax increases of approximately 1% annually. And based on these assumptions, the tax impact per household is approximately $20 annually. The 2015 10-year capital plan totals $282 million. The 2015 capital budget totals $58.8 million. The capital plan is largely driven by information technology, as you can see, facilities, and vehicle replacements. And lastly, I'm pleased to let Council know that some of our recent achievements, Peel Regional Police was recently recognized as one of Canada's top employers for young people for 2014 by MediaCorp. This is the third consecutive year that our organization has achieved this award. As well, we've been named as the Greater Toronto's top employers for 2015, and this is the fourth consecutive year that we've received this award. And on October 30th, I attended the Canada Awards for the Excellence Summit, where I accepted the Gold Award for Quality and Healthy Workplace. This is the Canada Award for Excellence. These awards demonstrate our commitment to excellence, innovation, quality, leadership, customer experience, as well as workplace wellness. In June 2014, our recent new construction project, the Materials Management Center over at 25 Wilkinson Road in Brampton, was awarded the LEED Award, Leadership in Energy and Environmental Design. So this achievement really is in no small undertaking, given the fact that this is mainly a body shop and garage, as well as a warehouse. We were also the recipient of the Employee Assistance Society of North America 2014 Corporate Award of Excellence. So this is for programs dedicated toward employee wellness. And this is we were the very first police service in North America to receive this award, recognizing our approach to services to our police officers and civilian members. We continue to work toward achieving the goals in our strategic plan and ensuring that we're meeting the needs of our community as well as our employees. And subject to any questions, that's my budget presentation.
Oh, there's always a few of those. Thank you very much, Chief. Mayor Crombie.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and welcome, Chief, and thank you for the presentation. Just wanted to say what an honor it is to serve on the Police Services Board. Thank you. Enjoyed the briefing that we've had. We've had only the one meeting, the briefing, but like the way things are going, I know we're going to have some challenges coming up ahead, especially going into a bargaining year with our unions and looking for more space. We have to plan for that in the capital budget going forward, new headquarters, but thought things were going in the right direction as we discussed the recruitment efforts being put towards recruitment of more diverse communities that will better reflect our community here in Peel. Also like the approach to the HUB program, that you're using that multidisciplinary I guess, concept approach to social services, bringing in other groups. That was terrific. Also want to just praise you a little bit personally and your team for the presence you have established at community and cultural events. I think all of us will agree that wherever we are, you seem to be there too. So wanted to thank you for that presence in the community and also in the schools. You've done a lot of work with our schools, and I know we all appreciate it. I want to thank you for finding some efficiency so you can lower the number of officers that you had originally forecasted from 22 down to 20, and for bringing in the lowest increase since 1997. So that's just my few comments, and I'd like to move the report, Mr. Chair, at the appropriate time.
Thank you very
Chief.
much.
Just move receipt of the report.
Move receipt.
Councillor Palashi.
Thank you. Thank you, Chief. I just had a quick question. The $165,000 per officer, can I get a little bit more of a breakdown on that? Where that cost is going for that one officer? The 3.3 for the 20.
Sorry, I'm just trying to say what the
3.3 million for 20.
Oh, okay.
So salary is
Okay. So the total salary cost for the officer is $117,000, and then there's $41,000 for a support staff. So the way the wage package is for every officer, there's also a complementary support staff position. It's a fully funded position as well. So it includes the 20, and then it'll include 8 civilian support staff as well.
Okay.
Wow.
I think I'm a little bit more confused, but maybe that's a conversation offline that I'll have with you. Thank you.
Councillor Parrish.
Well, thank you. Just to continue on that line of questioning, you're not really saying for every officer you hire a backup person.
No, the way the funding is, we do it as a full cost recovery, so we do it from January 1st. So sometimes we may not hire that officer till the class is in January, then there's another class in May. So the way the funding is that it incorporates in, so for 20 officers, it also will allow us to also provide support positions, civilian positions in the organization for 8 positions.
So for every 20 officers, you have 8 support staff?
Yes.
Okay, that makes more sense.
Yes.
Thank you. On page 6, you talk about the PRP Collision Repair Center. Now, you're not telling me you've actually trained police officers into doing collision repairs?
No, that's civilian support staff. We have a whole fleet of mechanics.
So you hire your own mechanics and you hire body work people, or?
Yes, we do.
Have you considered, I was on the towing committee in the last time I was on council, have you ever considered putting in a central pound for Brampton and one for Mississauga, where the police will be making the money for impounding cars rather than the body shops that are charging a fortune?
We've never looked at that. So for vehicle seizures, instead of doing the contract tows and using outside external agencies, we would have our own contract tow, and then we would do the service.
Yep, and you'd bring them all to one central yard in Brampton and one central yard in Mississauga.
No, we've never looked at that I'm aware of.
I wish you would, because you seem to have done all kinds of other interesting things, and that would be a source of revenue, but it would also save the insurance companies and the people who own the cars a lot of money, because the hassles they get going to different tow yards and outside the region and all over the place, it's quite confusing and expensive. So we might as well make the money, and we might as well save them some money. Did you send this presentation in yourself, already printed?
No.
The region did it for you?
I'm not sure if my people sent them. We printed it? We printed it.
I knew it. See, I'm a detective.
So that's good.
It had a staple in the corner. And it's not the plate expensive paper that's in the rest of the binder. It's cheaper paper. Congratulations.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Councillor Yanika.
Chief, welcome. Good to see you again. I'm going to follow up on the mayor's comments. There's a phrase that I use, that politics and golf, the only two sports where you can get ahead or fall behind by just standing still. And the events around the world and the challenges forces are facing, I think have really brought home what a marvelous police force we have in Peel. And I want you to know my constituents believe that. I'm very grateful for the job you and everyone does on our behalf.
Thank you.
My question is only this, Chief. One of the slides was showing what keeps you busy. And number one is break and enters, and I know that. Number two surprised me a bit. I would not have guessed that failure to appear, I want to understand that a little bit, that's sort of, I'm assuming, well, you can explain it, but I want to make sure people aren't left with the impression these are people, bad guys that haven't appeared in court and they're running around and we're trying, what's that all about?
Unfortunately, that's really what it is about.
Okay.
So it's this is proactive police work being done. So officers arrest somebody. So say I arrest somebody for domestic assault and they get released, and they're released on conditions that they're not to associate with their spouse.
Yes.
So then the officers then go back and check to make sure the person who's been arrested is complying with the conditions. And for the most part, they knock on the door and this gentleman is there with his spouse, so he gets rearrested for breaching his recog. So that's why you see the 13% increase. So
wow.
This is happening more and more. And last year, I think the increase was 8%. So the numbers are up 13%. So that is what's going on. The courts are feeling pressure to not put people in custody, to put them back out on the streets with conditions. So the officers are determined to ensure they're complying by their conditions, and often they're not, so they're rearrested.
And just so I'm clear, I'm fascinated by this. So is that more common a domestic case, which is still quite serious, or should people be led to be? No, there's also some serious crime folk.
No, absolutely. They're very serious crimes. People are being released on firearms offenses, drug offenses, traffic offenses. Very much so. I'm
going to ask, what can we do, or what should somebody be doing to not, because I'm sure my constituents would, is it the judges that, I don't want to get into a big discussion, but that is of some concern.
I think it was recently highlighted in our most recent homicide, our first homicide of the year, saying that this woman was killed, and from what I understand, she was a surety for this gentleman. So you can see that it's becoming more and more, the reporters are reporting on it, which is great for us because they're telling the stories that the people are being released. The officer that was killed at West recently, this person was released on multiple conditions. So this is a concern for police officers as well.
And just as a layperson, it seems to me, if you've got to keep your eye on someone, and follow me around, you'd need 3 officers, 3 shifts, 8 hours a day, wouldn't you? For everybody that's, wow, that's quite a concern.
It is a challenge.
Okay, thank you for that, Chief.
Thank you. Councillor Ross.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Chief, for your presentation. It was good. And I do appreciate you keeping the budget in a good line. I did have a question on the, I know that the request for assistance, especially with respect to mental health, is on the rise. What sort of strategies are you using to perhaps bring more mental health specialists in to assist with those calls than have just a complete police response to those calls?
We have had a COAST program. The COAST stands for Community Outreach and Support Team. So we have a police officer, I think there's a team of 5 that work with nurses from the hospital, and they're paired up together. The officer works plainclothes. The nurse is obviously plainclothes. They respond to calls, and they're trying to deal with families who are in crisis, dealing with people who are suffering from mental crisis, and trying to divert them from going to the hospital. The delay and the impact, the numbers you see in the increase is the hospitals are the apprehensions that we have to make, and then we're going to hospitals, and that's the delay time. So currently, Peel Police have a project going on with Dr. Duxbury from Carleton University, as well as with William Osler Health Centre and Trillium, and we're looking at ways to reduce the wait times. So last year, I think the wait time for officers on average was 2.5 hours, and equates over the year, I think it's $11 million. The costs are outrageous in the fact that spent officers waiting at the hospital for the person to be admitted. Under the Mental Health Act of Ontario, when police apprehend somebody who they feel could cause bodily harm, they have to transport them to a hospital, and they are not allowed to leave until the person is either admitted or discharged. So we were trying to identify ways through the Future of Policing Advisory Committee, through the province as well, because this isn't just unique to Peel, this is going on across Canada. We're trying to find ways that we can reduce the police impact, the police presence with people suffering from mental crisis, because I say that is a big issue. But our COAST team has been tremendous, had made tremendous success, because we were families who were dealing with them one time, then know the number, and they phone the coast team before they phone 911. So that's helping.
Good to know. And lastly, on the prisoner lunches, I'm sure we could find some inexpensive ways to help feed them, but I think you would have a lot of public support to perhaps not provide some.
Unfortunately, I've seen court decisions going on that defendants are being because they're not being provided proper meals. The defense lawyers are making application to say that they haven't been able to properly represent them because they haven't been able to give proper instruction to the defense lawyer. But we, at the Ontario Association of Chiefs of Police, we've been trying to take that on as one of our resolutions this year to try and work with the Ministry of the Attorney General to try to address that concern.
You have my support on that.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Groves?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Chief. Just to follow up on Councillor Raz's question with regards to the mental health and the cost of the police officers waiting there, it's very similar to the paramedics going and having to offload patients and waiting hours and hours. We continue to talk about this problem, and I'm not sure if this is something we need to take it through the governance committee that we have here to maybe get it through the province's, those folks at the province, to say this is a huge cost all around. It's a cost on our budget, on taxpayers. It's the cost on health care. We have doctor and nurse shortages. We have ambulance that we sometimes have to call on other municipalities to look to them to deploy their ambulances. And so I'm just putting it out there that maybe it is something that we need to come together as a region, because the region is growing, and that we work with you and work with our paramedics and say to the province, you've got to step up to the plate and do something about it, because I don't think that officers and paramedics should be waiting hours and hours there to offload a patient. They've got a triage system at the hospital, and I would think that that triage system should be able to handle a patient going in and making sure that they're in a place where they're secure, they're safe, and so you can go back out there, your officers and the paramedics, and look after other calls. So I'll put it out there, and our folks on our governance committee, I think that's what it's called, is it our intergovernmental relation, whatever that committee is, that we look at doing this and sending a really strong message to the province. Thank you.
Thank you.
No, it's a good point. I don't think the average citizen realizes the cost, not only in the wait times that it costs Peel Regional Police, and through this budget, but also the time spent in court. And then because it's current, maybe just on average, you could tell us, Chief, what it costs for a homicide investigation.
To go to court?
Yeah. Just
the average investigation is over $700,000 to do an investigation. That's through trial, and that is only if there's no wiretaps included in the investigation. If there's wiretaps investigation, and often there's a lot of technology needed to solve these cases these days, it's well over $1 million.
Yeah. Unreal, eh? Yeah, big hit. But thanks so much, Chief, for your presentation.
Thank you.
I want to thank you, certainly the executive team, as well as the staff that have worked through the process together with the board to bring it forward today.
Thank you very much.
And I have a motion from Mayor Crombie, seconded by Councillor Yanika, for receipt. All those in favor? Opposed, if any? Carried. Thank you very much. That moves us to the Ontario Provincial Police presentation.
We have less guns here on OPP, but it's just bigger guns.
They don't have any homicides in Caledon, so.
Just the odd one. Well, good afternoon, Chair Dale, members of council. It's my first time to be here, so it's nice to meet a lot of new faces. My staff isn't quite as big as Chief Evans, so I have to my left here is Dave Brack. He's with the Municipal Policing Bureau with the OPP, former Peel Regional Officer as well, and Chair Dale used to coach him in hockey many years ago, so. So we heard a few stories before, so. And to my right is Peggy Tollett from the town of Caledon. So we've done the budget together. And in the back here, we have Fu Wing Wong, who is the Chief Financial Officer of Caledon. And just a thanks as well to Christine Banks, who has done a lot of great work with us and helped me through this process. So. Okay. So for the budget this year, and I'm just going to go over a few things with you. A lot of you I haven't met, and I'm going to go. Oh, there. Yes. So last year in 2014, we did a bunch of community focus groups in the Caledon area. We conducted 4 of them, and we did some surveys as well with the municipality and the councillors. And the common theme for us was property crimes, traffic safety, and trouble with youth. That was a theme always from everyone. So this is what we've concentrated our efforts in Caledon and what I've been moving forward to as the new detachment commander. Next. We've incorporated in our detachment, we have a street crime unit, a major crime unit. As Chief Evans alluded to, we have similar programs, being the crime abatement program where we do the same stuff for domestics and so on and so forth. We need these programs to keep a safe community. That's good. I'm just going to give you a few statistics. The violent crime stats for 2013. In Caledon, we had 275. We had an 88% clearance rate. So per 100,000 for Caledon, it was 426 violent crimes. Get the next button, thanks. This is just a little comparison to the surrounding area. Town of Caledon, we were 426 as mentioned, and you can see the different ones from Orangeville, York, Peel, Nottawasaga, Dufferin, and the Ontario average was 833. So I'm very proud of the work that the members of Caledon do. It's a safe community, and we really work hard on the violent crimes. Next. This is in regards to results-driven policing, the crime severity index. Here in the town of Caledon, we had a 25 crime severity index. Can you see the next one for me? I'll just go over the chart here. And again, this is a comparison to the surrounding area. Caledon 25, Dufferin, Orangeville, Peel, region of York, and then the Ontario average was twice as much as Caledon. So it does show the good work that Caledon is doing within the court system and as well within the community. Next. In Caledon, we have a community, or Caledon OPP has a community response team. It's a very important part of our detachment. It's a part of an enhancement in the new contract. In the contract now, it's gone to a different model. The OPP billing model is done by calls for service, which Peggy will get into in a little bit. But one of our key components is our community response team. They're proactive in the policing. We created a bike patrol unit last year. We have 12 members on the bike patrol unit. We completed or started a ride team as well last year, which is a 10-person ride team. And so this team, community response team, works throughout the year, the different programs. They do the ride, they do the bike patrol, they concentrate on hotspots, visibility, and any different OPP initiatives. They're also responsible for our warrant execution, our crime abatement program. So this is their main focus. Next. Our traffic unit, again, brought up early in the presentation, as traffic is one of our key things in Caledon. We get a lot of calls for service in regards to traffic. We have now a 9-person traffic team. We do the hotspot targeting, high visibility, Highway 10, Project 10-4, enforcement during peak times, a lot of commercial motor vehicle enforcement, OPP initiatives during the long weekends, bylaw investigations with the motorcycle noise bylaw. We work with the Town of Caledon bylaw. So our traffic unit is very active, and I'll show you some numbers a little later. Next one, actually. So traffic enforcement. This particular one that you're seeing, I'm going to give you a little different one. I updated the statistics, and I don't think you have them now, for the total of 2014. So they're just a little bit different than what you have. So our first one is the POA Part 1s and 3s. You'll see the 2012, 2013, and our 2014 total was actually higher than, it was 19,664. Our racing charges and 7-day impoundments was 128. Our impaired over 80 charges was 110. Our roadside suspensions was 224. So in 2014, our detachment members did a great job. We've increased our numbers in the enforcement part. That's the good and bad story. You know, enforcement's good, but we don't like to get the high numbers, but they are out there. Next, please. Our commercial motor vehicle team, again, is very active within our municipality. Again, these stats will be a little different, but we have 6 fully trained commercial motor vehicle inspectors. We had 2,577 commercial vehicles stopped. We had commercial motor vehicles inspected, 682. Hours spent was over 2,000, and the charges that we laid were, well, and this one here is 2,618, and 342 vehicles taken out of service. And again, the 2014 just vary a little bit different, where the numbers are a little bit higher. Thanks. Again, the same thing with our motor vehicle collisions. Everything over the last few years from 2011 right through to 2014 has pretty well stayed the same, between mid-1100s to 1,224. The motor vehicle personal injury accidents, again, was 211 in 2011 to a final number of 210 in 2014. Our motor vehicle fatalities, we actually, in 2011 it was 3, which it's not a good year when you have 1, but we had 3 then and 7 for the next 2 years. And in 2014, the total was 5. So it dropped a couple, which is the good news, but still far too many for sure. Caledon Detachment, we pride ourselves on visibility. That's the key to any community. When I took over about a year ago, that was one of the key things I wanted to get out there, is having visibility within the town of Caledon. We've created a lot of different programs, as I mentioned, the RIDE program, bike patrol unit, so on and so forth. Next one. We have a lot of different other programs at within the Caledon Detachment. We have a great auxiliary unit. We have the bike and foot patrol. We've moved our extended services office in Bolton, where it used to be downtown Bolton. For those that have made it north, we're now in our community wellness center, right in just outside Bolton. So it's been very beneficial. Next. Again, we talked about our community resource officers, RIDE team, platoon officers. Again, are key components of visibility. Next. Partnerships. One of the key components of policing is good community partnership, and we really have great partnerships within our community. We have a great relationship with Peel Regional Police. Chief Evans has been nothing but great to me. She's a very nice lady and helps me out when I need it. We've got a good relationship now. We've just been involved in a great investigation. If you heard about all the mischiefs that happened recently, where 2 people were charged with over 300 charges, and cleared a whole bunch of occurrences that were both in Peel's area as well as Caledon. So it was great teamwork on both sides. Okay, next. Again, just touching on our auxiliaries. Our auxiliaries are key to Caledon. These are members that volunteer their time. They've done over 70 events in 2014 in Caledon. The hours actually have went up. This is as of October, so it's near 6,000 hours. They just do a tremendous job. They go to many community events. They support us at our fall colors and so many different events. We have a lot of other community partners in the Policing Advisory Council of Caledon, the PAC, Road Watch, Crime Prevention, Restorative Justice, so on and so forth. Next. Just a quick list of some of the programs and partnerships that the Caledon Detachment is involved with. I don't need to read them to you, but there they are. Next. Some of our crime prevention strategies, and again, I think every agency has a little bit of different crime prevention strategy. We work in partnership with Peel Crime Stoppers. We have the Arson Prevention Program, Graffiti Hotlines, the CCOP, Citizens on Patrol, Lock It or Lose It, Home James, which was very successful this past 2014. We just had the end of the year get-together, the beginning of the year get-together a couple of weeks ago, and it was a very successful program, and it is keeping people off the road that are drinking and driving, and it's a benefit to the Caledon OPP. Next. Youth Initiative. Those that don't know me, I know some of the local councillors know me. I'm very keen on Youth Initiative. I get involved with the youth, and it's key to the success of policing. Over the years, I think we've had a very disconnect with the youth. And my first year here, we've tried to get that back on board. We've got a lot of different programs keyed at the youth, from the Heads Up program to the positive ticketing, the DARE, OPP Kids. We as well have dedicated school officers, not quite as many as Peel, but we have 4. So they do a great job. And we have a mentorship program and leadership with the kids, and we have a great program, Shop with the Cop, with the kids for Christmas. So a lot of good programs for sure. Next. Media is the key to everything. I think it's getting that message out there. At Caledon Attachment, we have a great media officer. We do a lot of different little things. We do our media releases, blast outs, Did You Know? I do a little article once a month on Did You Know on different themes. We have a lot of information sessions, a lot of releases, electronic traffic programs, so on and so forth. So it's key to getting the message out to the community and working with the media. And I know the local media attend a lot of the events and are very appreciated. That's pretty well it for me, and I get to turn it over to Peggy, and if you have any questions after, I'll be for sure happy to answer them.
Okay, so the previous contract for municipal policing was primarily based on the number of uniform officers, so such as inspectors, sergeants, and constables. But for the 2015 OPP billing model, it's a completely new model, and what it does is it looks at base costs plus calls for service model. So from the slide, you can see that the majority of the cost, which is base cost, is the 60.1%, and then for the calls per service is the 39.9%. So the new model doesn't account for individual FTEs, with the exception with enhancements. That's over and above the regular service, which I'll go through in a little more detail in the next couple slides. And just to keep in mind, with this new model, it doesn't mean any change in the service level. The service level stays the same. It doesn't mean a decrease in the service level or increase. It's the same model. It's just a different way of building it out. So the base model, as you can see there, of the 61.1% there, it consists of all the costs for staffing at the detachments. It's municipal policing across all the province. The base level includes routine patrols, crime prevention, ride patrols, and it also includes all kinds of base service within and administration costs. They take that total cost and divide it by the total number of properties, both residential and commercial, for the province, that giving you the 200.51 per property. And we get the property count from, obviously, MPACT, Municipal Property Assessment Corporation. The balance of the OPP budget consists of the 39.9%, which is more of the variable part of the budget. This is the calls per service. This can relate to calls that are more reactive in nature, such as drug violations, criminal code, property crimes. Each call for service has a weighted number of hours and then a rate attached to that. They take that based on the call service for, like, say, Caledon, and then they average that out over the last 4 years. The total costs involved in the calls for service, it is approximately $2.8 million of the overall budget. Now, there's fluctuations in costs, which will smooth out over the 4 years as it rolls out. So in a given year, when you have a large spike, each year it will average it out so that you don't have huge increases and decreases. So I mentioned enhancements to the service. The new model has base cost plus cost plus service, but also in Caledon we actually have 27 contract enhancement positions. These are over and above the base and calls for service. These are requests by our council to increase the services within Caledon. So we have 3 units. One is community response, the other one is street crime, and the next one is traffic unit. The total amount in enhancements represents about $4 million of the overall budget. The town currently receives 2 programs for grants. One is the 1,000 Officer Program, which generates about $140,000 per year, and then the other one is the Community Policing Program, which generates about $180,000 per year. So the total grant funding expected for 2015 is $320,000.
One of the big changes we noticed with the new OPP model is the removal of the PSU, or provincial service usage. So previous budgets, we would have basically a grossed up budget, and then we'd receive a credit. Now it's basically netted off our overall budget. So the PSU used to represent when Caledon officers were temporarily redeployed for handling provincial matters. That used to represent around $816,000 of the overall budget. We used to receive a certain credit for that. And for the prisoner transport, that was probably around $42,000, so that gets to the overall $858,000 credit. Just a breakdown of the 2015 OPP budget. We have the OPP contract policing, and then we have the OPP property services. This is the 3 facilities that we have within Caledon. Then we have the annual equipment budget, the recovery from the grant, and the stabilization reserve. So this next slide shows you the 2014 approved budget, the 2015 proposed budget, and then the projections from 2016 to 2018. So the first column on your left is basically the description of each of the types of the budget. Then you have the approved budget, and then forward we have the 2016 budget and the projections. So as I discussed earlier, the 2015 budget now is net of the PSU grant. So if you look at the 2014 budget, our grossed up policing costs for 2014 was $13.3 million. And then further down, you would see that we would get a credit for PSU, or provincial service usage, of $816. Now that's basically netted off the overall number in the 2015 budget. So the 2015 budget for the OPP contract and projections, including base level, calls for service, and the enhancements, is roughly $11.8 million. Then the OPP property service costs, again, this is for the 3 facilities, the new station and then the 2 smaller locations. That represents about $400,000, a small increase from 2014, basically just from increased costs of utilities and insurance. Then we have a regular $150,000 budget for equipment. Then the 2 grant recoveries that I show there, the $320,000, which again is the community policing program and the 1,000 officer program. This gives us our overall budget of $12 million, a slight decrease from last year. And then the projections for 2016 to 18 are adjusted based on inflation and increased property counts, because now we're going to a different type of billing model, which looks at more of property counts. At this time, we're not proposing to use the reserve, but that could change because this is a new billing model. And what could change that could factor that in is we have the 2 grants that we currently get. We currently get those. We don't know if those are going to continue, but at this point we're budgeting that we're going to continue to get them. Overtime in the budget is based on a certain amount budgeted, but then if there's actuals that are above the budget, we will have that additional cost. The provincial service credit, we used to get a certain amount larger than probably what the average is. So this could cause some differences in going forward. And then, of course, there's always risks associated with the new model, so that we, at this point, are not needing to use the reserve, but this could change going forward. In saying that, we do have 3 reserves altogether with a fairly healthy balance of $6.9 million, roughly $5.8 that's in the OPP stabilization reserve, $700,000 in the facilities reserve, and then $400 in the development charges reserve. That concludes my presentation.
Thank you very much. Councillor Groves.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Chief, for your presentation, and Peggy and the other gentleman sitting next to the Chief. Just so that I can brag a little bit about our OPP policing, the Chief has taken a really great approach, and his approach is all about community approach. And I think that the focus that he's putting on youth goes back to an ounce of prevention is better than a pound of cure. If you prevent and you nip things at an early stage, whatever it is, you get better results in the end. So I think your focus on the youth and the programs that you are doing with the youth is is great. The fact that you're building relationships with them, they are seeing you not just as enforcers, but they are seeing you as community partners, somebody that they can talk to. A day with the chief, I think that's a great thing. You forgot to mention that. You talked about the shop with the cop, but I think it's great that you are building those relationships. And one of the things that we have and that I really like is the restorative justice program. I'm not sure if Peel has that program, and maybe the chair knows with his experience on the Police Services Board. It's a great program. It's a program where if a youth commits a crime, rather than going through the process of going through court, there's a committee made up of citizens, police officers, they're trained, and they bring the parties together. They sort of sort it out over there, and that youth does not have to go through that process of going through court and dealing with all that stuff. And most times, I would say, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I would say 99% of the time, you're able to achieve what it is that you need to achieve so that the parties are able to, they apologize to one another, they're remorseful, and it's a good lesson learned. So I'm all for that program. I think it's something maybe Peel. Oh, you have it? Oh, great. Okay. Perfect. So thank you, Chief, for your presentation. Thank you for the great work that you're doing in our community. And again, I think that the community approach is the best approach to have. I especially like the bike patrol and the high visibility that you have in the community, because I think that that's very, very important, that people know that the police are there and they're riding around or they're walking around and can talk to them when they're just out and about in the community. So thank you, and I'm happy to move receipt. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Ennis.
Through you, Chair, thank you, Inspector Melanson, for coming in, Peggy, and for the presentation. I would like to also echo the sentiments and applauding your efforts to increase visibility and presence, especially with our youth. My daughter's only in kindergarten, and she already knows who Officer Brenda is, which is fabulous. So I applaud those efforts, but would like to ask you to explain the 10-4 program, because it is a new program. I believe this is to deal with fatalities on Highway 10, which I could be wrong, but I believe that that is the majority of our fatalities is along that corridor. So if you could explain that, especially because I know that the media is here and there's lots of through traffic traveling along that route, I would like to draw a little bit of attention to that program.
Thank you. Actually, we did a evaluation on Highway 10 for 2014, and I guess with the 5 fatalities, actually one was only related to Highway 10, which is a good thing, whereas previous years the number was a lot higher. But we've directed a lot of our enforcement to Highway 10, both educational-wise and enforcement-wise. In 2014, we actually probably laid over 10,000 tickets on Highway 10. It is a very busy road, as you know, and it stretches a long way, and it's a key to get out there and to do the enforcement. We're also working with the town of Caledon, the region of Peel, MTO as well, to come up with some solutions to better police it, better, just make it a safer road. So it is a joint effort with all the different partners, and our key focus is not just always on enforcement, but education. We do a lot of the media stuff out there and make people aware of it. So, but it is working hand in hand with the different partners to make it safer for everyone, because it is an interesting road. I'll say that, coming from the north or from the east coast where I'm originally from, it's a little different for sure, but we really want to make it a safer place for everyone.
Thank you. Mayor Thompson.
Chief Inspector Mendelson and Ms. Tollett, thank you for making the presentation today. There's a couple of things I think we need to explain, because OPP is a little bit of a different animal than what Peel Region is. And we're talking about our new funding formula. Can you just explain a little bit what our new formula is and how it's been changed, like over the 4-year? You broke it out, but it's different. So can you just explain a little bit how we got here? Because I know a lot of municipalities that have OPP, a lot of them are saying they can't afford. They got huge tax increases. I think we've benefited, but having said that, it's a different formula proposal, because we have to deal with from a provincial outfit versus just within our own municipality or region. So can you explain that a little bit?
Sure. So the previous budget was always based on a certain amount of people and so
Right.
many officers. So it's a different model altogether, where now we're going more of a base per cost per service, so that municipalities across the province are paying for the service that they're using and a portion of the overall cost for policing. So it's a different model. It's like a pay for a service used kind of model. The town of Caledon is actually benefiting slightly from that, so we're seeing that small decrease in our budget for 2015. I think Brackett can explain a little bit more about the model.
Just with our new model that's been implemented by the ministry for police services, in 2011, for example, we were policing 324 municipalities across the province, and we actually had 30 municipalities that were paying under $100 per household. We actually had one that was paying $6 per household for the year. And we also had 8 that were over $800 a household. Out of those 8, we had 2 that were over $1,000 a household. So the discrepancy from one end of the spectrum to the other end of the spectrum was a major concern. It was a concern with the Ontario Association of Police Services Boards. It was a concern with the AMO Group, the Association of Municipalities of Ontario. So we all worked together collectively to come up with something that was a little easier to understand, a little more transparent, and a little fairer for all communities. The new model that's being brought in, we actually have more municipalities going up in price than we have going down, but we are bringing everybody in to a level that's a little more manageable. The overall average across the province is $360 per household. The $200 that you see, that's for having the base level of service available. So your municipalities that were paying $6 a household are now up to $200 a household. That is to have the OPP available, should anything happen in their community, because they have the same resources available to them as the other municipalities do. So that's kind of the concept with the new billing model.
Thank you. 2 more quick things, and out of that too, I guess, to follow up. So this is good for 4 years, and then we review that again, correct? What's the term? I guess what I'm looking for is the term. Is a 5-year term?
The term of the contract for the town of Caledon is a 5-year term.
Okay, thank you.
With this new billing model, the ministry had canceled all contracts in the province on the 31st of December 2014. So when we introduced the new billing model, we gave municipalities the option of a 3, a 4, a 5, or a 6-year term. And if they were still having some issues coming with the term, there was a 6-month, I'd call it a bridge contract, where they could decide what term they wanted. But ultimately, it was 3 to 6 year term, and the town of Caledon has, the town of Caledon selected a 5-year term.
Yeah. Okay. 2 things I wanted to clarify is you notice there's a lot of vehicle inspection, or on vehicle inspections, we have a lot of vehicles taken off the road. Maybe it wouldn't hurt to tell them that you were looking for bad vehicles in the first place.
It's not the farm vehicles, we know that. No, it's, I think a lot of it is we've increased our enforcement, which is a good thing. We have taken off vehicles that we just don't go randomly, of course, picking out. We can tell our inspectors are very trained. They know which vehicles to look for and which ones needs inspection. So it's pretty good to the naked eye, so to speak. And then they can, bring them in to make sure they are safe on the roads, because, there is a lot of commercial motor vehicle accidents and cause a lot of injury and death. But our guys are trained, our guys and girls are trained, and it's just they do a great job of identifying the vehicles that need to be taken off, and they do. As you can see by our numbers that we've increased. So if you take it back, it's probably on par from years ago. But it's in the commercial motor vehicle traffic, in the area has increased, and of course in and around the Peel region, it's just huge now. So with different companies coming forward.
And one more thing I just want to clarify, just because it's Caledon and I'm proud of it, but the racing charges for 7-day suspensions is high. But you can also say, or could you tell them what the percentage is that are actual Caledon residents that are part of that?
Very small.
Just want to know that it's the ones passing through that and are hurried to get through to Caledon or paying for it.
And I will say, actually, that is true. Not a lot of people do, but we get a lot of, especially with the summertime and even the ski time, we get a lot of people that come through our area heading to the Blue Mountains and to the beach and so on and so forth. Very minimal people from Caledon direct for sure.
Thank you very much again for coming, and I really appreciate the clarifications. Thank you.
Thank you, and thank the. I'd like to thank the three for being here. Inspector, you mentioned that David Brack came from Peel. Well, you can see we trained him well there. And you also mentioned that I had the privilege of coaching him. Actually, David, my very first year of coaching hockey, I got there by accident, and it was a Bantam team, and that's a long story how that happened. But I went on by default the next year to have the minor midget team, which David was part of, and trying to keep everything as positive as I could because I had taken my level 1 and 2 by that time, and I didn't want to use negative words like lose or lost. So it's either we're going to win, or we're going to learn. So after our first 4 games of learning, the captain, Terry, who you'll remember, Langstead, approached myself and the 2 younger individuals I had as my assistant coaches and said, Coach, can you just stand outside the dressing room? I want to talk to the team. So he goes in, and David and Bobby look at me and said, what's that all about? And I said, well, we're going to get fired. What else could it be about, right? So we walk in, you could hear a pin drop. And Terry says, well, it's unanimous. I just took a vote from the team. And I go, here it goes. He goes, Coach, it's unanimous. We're sick and tired of learning. We want to know when we're going to start winning. So as a matter of fact, at the end of that season, and David will recall, we did end up winning the championship. Yeah, so it was a good news story. But no, thanks so much for being here. And I do have a motion of receipt by Councillor Grove, seconded by Councillor Innes. All in favor? Opposed, if any? Carried. Thank you.
Thank you very much for having us. And just one clarification, he tells me he was a superstar, though.
Sleeper star? Oh, no, sorry. Sorry.
Sleeper for sure.
He was a good ball player, too. I just want to let you know that the budget discussion and process will continue on February the 19th with presentations from the conservation authorities as well as each commissioner on the regional services and programs. So Report 7.1, which is the 2015 operating capital budget, if someone would be kind enough to move deferral to the February 19th meeting, moved by Mayor Thompson, second by Councillor Carlson, that the report of the Commissioner of Finance and Chief Financial Officer titled 2015 Operating and Capital Budget be deferred to the February 19, 2015 Regional Council Budget Meeting. All in favor? Opposed, if any? Carried. Then the confirming bylaw. Moved by Councillor Palashi, seconded by Councillor Yanika, that the bylaw 8-2015 to confirm the proceedings of Regional Council at its budget meeting held on February the 12th, 2015, and to authorize the execution of documents in accordance with the Region Appeal bylaws relating thereto, be given the required number of readings, taken as read, signed by the Regional Chair and the Regional Clerk, and the corporate seal be affixed thereto. All in favor? Opposed, if any? Carried. A motion to adjourn, moved by Councillor Moore, seconded by Councillor Miles. All in favor? Carried. We're adjourned. Thank you.